Now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be looking at a party game. We're going to be sculpting things out of a clay, Play-Doh-ish, wax type of thing. We're going to be playing Dohdles. Now, Dohdles itself, it's a re-implementation and re-streamlining of a game called Barbarossa, which I believe won the Spiel des Jahres back in '88 or somewhere around there. This was done by the guy Klaus, who created Settlers of Catan. So this is 3 to 6 players, ages 10 and up. Takes about 30 to 40 minutes to play. Let's take a look. At the beginning of Dohdles, every person gets one of these boards, and all the boards are different. They have different words on here that you're going to pick. You're going to pick 2 of these things to make with some sculpting sort of wax or clay. And you can make up your own if you want, but this gives you a selection. Once you've done that, you flip this over, and this side of the board is the same no matter which board you have. For instance, this board matches this one in questions, but they have different things to do. So, and these are just questions to help you ask other people, but you can ask whatever you want. Now, in a 4-player game, this is what it would look like. Everyone makes 2 sculptures. Now, if it's only 3 players, each player would make 3 sculptures. But in this case, there's 4 players there. And just to show you what these might look like. Now, they're supposed to be all one color. That's orange. But I live in Phoenix, and it's 110 degrees out. And when the UPS man delivered it, they all got melted, and then they unmelted, and then it was hard to get them all apart. But this is kind of what they look like from the ground level here, a few of them. And some of the other ones on this side. Now what you're trying to do is be good at guessing other people's and having yours guessed. If the first person that gets to the end is the winner, or else when the game ends, whoever's the furthest ahead. Now each player's little piece there starts on a starting spot there. And when it's somebody's turn, they can ask something about somebody else's clay. So anybody other than the red person, let's say it was their turn, and let's say they want to learn more about this. They push this here. Now what you see here is a couple of question marks. And what this means is this is going to allow them to ask any 2 questions they want about this. Now as I showed you earlier, it looks like maybe this thing's sort of on wheels or on I don't know what it is, but that's kind of what it looks like. Now they can ask them any of the questions on here. This will help people that maybe have a problem thinking of questions. And these are specifically made because it knows what types of categories things are in the back of the boards. And for new players, that's good. For players that play this again before, they may want to make up their own questions. So I might say, is this a mode of transportation? And the player can only say one of 4 things. Those are yes, no, maybe, and cannot be answered clearly. And maybe they answer yes. My second question is it fast? And their answer is no. Okay, and that's it. That's the end of my turn. So that'd be somebody else's turn. They can ask about anybody's, any other one that they see here, or they can ask about the same one. So maybe the next player was green, right? And maybe they want to ask about, you know, this one here or this one here, maybe one of the orange ones over here, right? They could do that and ask a question. But just for the sake of it, let's show you how this works if they wanted to continue to interrogate about this one. Now notice that every odd second question has question marks on it. The next ones have a letter on it. And remember, if you're asking a question, you can't ask about one of the letters in the word. When you go here, it moves this up one, and you ask them about one of the first 5 letters in the solution. Now keep in mind, now the solution was written on the back of this. When they did theirs originally, they would write what it really is on the back. And they'd say, what's the first letter? And they would first say S, and then they'd write it. And they say it first because at any time, anybody can guess about any one of these. So based on my clue, Purple might know the answer and throw their little cube in there and yet shout Dohdles, and they'd get it. They'd get a chance to answer. Maybe 2 people try to throw it at the same time. The one that came out first, Purple there, gets to answer. It's a cool little, kind of like a gimmick, but it's kind of fun. But you can ask about any of them. So let's say someone threw it in there and said, I want to guess. And they say snowmobile. And he says, nope, sorry, you're wrong. Now, if there was a second person that got in, they would get, whoever's second would get a choice. If they got it, the first people got it correct, whoever also threw in at the same time would not get a guess. So maybe it was no, and the second one did, There was no second one. There's just the first one. They said snowmobile, and it's wrong. All right, and then we'd go to the next player's turn. And this would continue moving around, people having turns, and basically asking about one of these, depending on whether it's a question or a letter, all the way through. Now let's say someone interrogated here a little bit later, and they asked for the letter, because that's the next one. And the person said K. They would write K, they'd say K. Now, when you ask for the letters, you don't have to go in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could go in any order you want. It's just in this case, I did 1 and 2. You might want to do 5 first, or 3 first, or whatever. You can go 1 first, and then 5, any order you want. So I put SK, and as soon as I said K, the purple player threw their thing in, yelled Dohdles, and they get to answer. Now, let's just say they said skateboard, and the red player would say, correct. They would flip this over, show it says skateboard, and then we score. Now, when you guess, if you get it right, you move ahead the amount of space, the green arrow spaces. So if I'm here, I would move 3. 1, 2, 3, purple would move there. If I had gotten it wrong, you would move back, in this case, 1. So it was either would have ended up there for a wrong answer, or 1, 2, 3, 3 for a right answer. Now notice how the board itself, if you guess a lot and you come down here, but then you get it again right, 1, 2, 3, 4, you go from 5. So from here, you'd have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wrong guesses, but then you would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, get back to even. So you could have 5 wrong guesses at the beginning of the game and then have a good guess and be back where you started. So it's not bad to guess, because the gamble usually is pretty good, depending on what you're seeing there. Now, the person whose sculpture this is can possibly get points too. Now, the trick of this game is you don't want to get it too easy and you don't want to get it too hard. If someone had guessed this right off the bat, the person who made this clay would get 0 points. If they're here, they'd get 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. So you don't want it to be too easy or too hard, because this is the direction that the questions go in. You want them to figure it out about halfway through the amount of questions. So 1, 2, 3, after the 4th set of clues that were given, because the person who got it right here, that red person who made this clay would have gone 3 as well. 1, 2, 3. Now they would be pretty much tied with purple there, and that's how the scoring works. That's pretty much the game. Everyone at one at a time does a turn, interrogates. Anybody can answer any time. The game ends when somebody gets here, or when there's only one person with any clay sculptures left that haven't been guessed. And then let's say there's only purple left, all these have been guessed and they're pulled off the board. If there's only purple left and it's their turn, the game ends and whoever's the furthest is the winner. And one last thing to note is once a interrogation sort of disc gets here, if they got it right, the red person would get none. Of course, the person who guessed would still get the amount of points on the board as showed earlier, but this will eventually, the next time this one gets moved, it moves off, and that means this thing cannot be guessed and it actually comes off the board if it hasn't yet been guessed. So that's how things come off, and that's how you play Dohdles. All right, well, there's Dohdles. Well, I typically do like party games. My family loves party games. How is this one? Well, I went back and watched the Barbarossa video to see how it was different, and I could see how they've streamlined it. The scoring is so much more streamlined. It's so much more intuitive than what it used to be. So I can definitely see this is definitely an improvement upon what Barbarossa used to be. Now for me, when I first got this, the first thing I thought of was Cranium, right? You play the game Cranium and you've got that clay, and it always seemed to be the hardest one for me because I'm not that artistic when it comes to molding things and arting and drawing. So I was wondering how I was going to feel about this. And the cool thing is, if you've ever played a party game called Dixit before, it's a game where you're, putting these interesting art cards down and coming up with like a tagline. And the cool thing in that game is you're trying not to give the easiest clue, or you're not trying to give the hardest clue, because you want to be somewhere in the middle. You want at least one person to get it, but not everybody. And this has that same method to it where you're sculpting the thing and you're like, you don't want it to be super easy, but at the same time you want people to guess it, because if they guess yours in the middle of the game or in the middle of the amount of clues given for your little sculpture, you'll get the most points. And I like that. Now, the only problem I found with that is when I explain that to people up front and say, hey, you want it to be not too hard, not too easy, what happens a lot of times is the average person, I would say, is probably not that great at sculpting things. And so they think, okay, let me make it kind of hard, but not really. And then it ends up being impossible, right? Because they don't realize how hard it is and how hard it's gonna be for people to guess it. So I would just tell people, you know what, you're gonna get the most points if it's in the middle, but don't worry about that. Just try to make it so they can't guess it right off the bat, but maybe after a clue or two, and that usually is like enough to calibrate it to make the game work the way it's supposed to work. But overall, it was fun. I mean, it's not one of those party games I'm going to pull out all the time, because personally, It's, you're making the clay, you're making the guesses, and it is fun to play with it. And again, the most fun thing in this actually is what most people will look at this game and go, oh, it's a gimmick. You throw your cube in that thing, it comes sliding out. Oh, it's just a gimmick. And it is, but it works. And that's actually the most fun part of the game is when someone gives a clue and you're throwing it in there and you're watching who comes out first. That's actually the most exciting part of the game usually. So it was fun. It's not the one I'm going to bring out all the time because again, sculpting clay and doing that thing is just I'm not that good at it, so I didn't enjoy it as much. But everybody else I play with it enjoyed it quite a bit. So it is interesting if you're an artistic type of person, or you want to, even if you're not, watching what people have made and trying to guess it, and as the clues go on, the letters come on, you finally get it, is fun. So for me, it was okay. It wasn't the greatest party game of the year. It's not one that I'm going to be pulling out all the time. But for people that like those artistic games, or if someone suggests Cranium to me, that, hey, I played this before. Oh, did you like the clay part? Try this. That might be a way to play this. So for me, it was an okay game. Not terrible, not great, kind of in the middle of the road of party games, but I can definitely see it is an improvement on Barbarossa. So if this looks interesting to you, that's Dohdles.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.